very close quarters fighting over the eastern Heartlands. A good deal of gun duels between aircraft, in a sky that at times seemed to be overflowing with aircraft from both sides. It was undoubtedly one of the funnest battles I had ever fought. The day begun in the humble, albeit very versatile, TA-30 Compass, preparing to take off from the K92 highway strip and fitted out for air-to-air combat. I had a feeling the first part of this battle was going to be a high attritional affair among what might be considered the more basic airframes. Straight away I could see the airspace by the Dustbowl airstrip filling with enemy aircraft. TA-30 compasses like my own, as well as CI-22 crickets, and a number of chicanes also. And rather than run the risk of flying into the teeth of these aircraft, I banked left and headed towards the coast, but was immediately locked on by an enemy missile, one I just about managed to dodge. However, it did cause me some tail and engine damage. But my aircraft was still flyable, and so I continued with my mission, engaging enemy aircraft, moving to attack our forward airbase at the K92 highway strip. My first target, a fellow compass, fell to my first missile. Having quickly landed for repairs and returning to the sky, I went searching for more targets. And coming around, I found a second victim, a CI-22 cricket, on a gun run towards our airbase. I personally find crickets quite adept at avoiding infrared missiles with their propeller engine and all, and so I decided to go in on guns with this one, saving my missiles for more distant, more dangerous adversaries. A quick squirt from my 25mm rotary cannon and the compass exploded, and I immediately searched for and found my next target, another cricket. This time, however, a combination of the mountains and the foggy clouds obscured my target slightly, and my first gun run was unsuccessful, leading me to have to brake hard and go around again. And so pulling up vertical to shed off some speed, bearing in mind that the compass is not the fastest thing in the sky, I came about and dove upon my target like a swooping bird of prey. Lining up the guns, fired a quick 2-second burst, ripping off one of the cricket's wings, sending it plummeting towards the mountainside. Feeling somewhat chuffed of my killing score so far, I returned to the main part of the battlefield, where I fell in upon a major dogfight, and right under the fucking sights of an enemy compass. His first shot clipped me, his second burst finishing off. Somehow, of course, I miraculously survived the explosion and returned to base for another aeroplane. This time, however, in the process of taking off, our base came under attack. Taking off in an elephant walk, the aircraft in front of me exploded quite spectacularly, with its crew ejecting, and I had to ensure I wasn't about to run into any debris as I charged down the runway at ever increasing speeds. Rather hairy takeoff complete, I turned back towards the fight. Several enemy aircraft were in the vicinity of the highway strip, and I wanted them gone. My first target was a already damaged compass, which I finished off with a missile. Perhaps a bit of a waste in hindsight, but it is what it is. And over by the mountains, several more enemy aircraft were retreating away from their somewhat successful attack. Another compass fell to a second missile, and then I saw the Revoker. Until this point, the most advanced aircraft in the fight, I fired a missile. And to my surprise, the Revoker didn't even try to deploy countermeasures, getting whacked by the missile and breaking up in the air. I was about to engage a cricket, but then an Ifrit caught my attention. A very dangerous adversary, especially for something as humble as the compass, but I was determined to go for him, and so locking on, I headed in his direction, where he was harassing some of our own crickets. It was due to his chosen targets that I was able to catch him out in a fairly low energy state, as he manoeuvred backwards and forwards at relatively slow speeds trying to engage the slow moving crickets. Got within guns range and fired, scoring several hits, but not enough to really bring him down. However, I perceived that I had taken off one of his rudder fins. Taking a moment to defend against a guided missile, I then turned back towards my target, hoping to finish him off. I got back on his tail in something of a scissors fight, and I wasn't sure how long I'd be able to hold this up for in my compass, with him in a far more powerful aircraft. Then I saw the missile coming in. I'm not sure where it came from, perhaps from the sea, but either way, my target was not about to dodge it. My kill had been stolen, but at least this Ifrit was gone, and I was awarded part of the credit for having damaged him in the first place. And as I headed back towards the base to ensure that the airspace there was clear, I came across a tarantula, unescorted, firing missiles at long range. I believe engaging some of our ground forces. A couple of quick bursts from my guns, and the aircraft simply evaporated in the sky, quite spectacularly. With the airspace over our bases somewhat clear, it was time for a change of aircraft. My main, the FS-20 Vortex. I had kitted up my aircraft with a mixture of air-to-air and air-to-ground weaponry. Air-to-air carried internally, air-to-ground carried externally. I knew that the air-to-ground weapons on the wings would affect my radar cross-section, but the air battle was going quite firmly in our favour, and I very quickly fired off the Tusco B missiles, following them up as they charged towards the upper atmosphere. The Dust Bowl airstrip had fallen to our forces, or had been more or less destroyed really, and now Sandrift Air Base was the main target, or rather the factories that were keeping Sandrift Air Base full of aircraft. But I amused myself destroying some outlying targets, radar stations on the hillsides and the like. However, enemy aircraft were still taking to the skies, and I merged with an enemy compass, getting into a tight one-circle turning fight with him. A fight that, in my opinion, he had the advantage. A slow-speed, tight turning circle was more in the compass's capabilities as opposed to the Vortex. But reversing the turn, I caught him out, and he cut across my nose, starting yet another scissors battle, similar to the one I had earlier with the Ifrit. My first burst was terrible, missing him completely, but I stayed with him, banking hard and pulling up to miss the mountainside. Reversing the turn once more, I tried to get firmly on his tail. This time I lined up the guns very well and fired again, but somehow just missed my target. And this sort of seesaw action went on for quite some time. My enemy was doing a rather good job really of keeping me at bay, and it seemed like he was hoping for the overshoot, which I was not willing to give, and my fingers were hovering over the thrust vectoring controls in case I needed to pull up short very quickly. At last, however, I lined up the guns, fired a burst and got the kill, setting his engines afire and taking off a chunk of his tail. One of the funnest air kills I had achieved in this battle so far. Latest target destroyed, I now locked onto a Revoker at long range and switched to my scimitar missiles, my long range radar guided missiles. I pulled up hard so that I could see over the distant hills, behind which the Revoker kept on hiding. Having line of sight, I released my missile, sending it on its way to its terminal flight of glory. Having returned to base to rearm, I took off once again, using the taxiway to get to the air quickly. This time I was carrying as many AGM-68s as I could fit aboard the aircraft, together with 125kg bombs, as well as some medium range S3 heat-seeking missiles, just in case. It was at this point that I observed a distant friendly tarantula, whacking the enemy airbase with 76mm guided shells from its side-mounted cannon, the rounds coming in a long, spectacular arc. I had long since fired off an AGM-68 missile, targeting an enemy munitions truck, because I love how they explode. Approaching the enemy airbase, whose air defences were for now suppressed, I decided I will follow up my missile strike with a bombing run on one of the enemy factories. And even now, all this time as I approach the target, 76mm shells continue to impact around the base. It was beautiful. At last, I came in on a shallow dive, targeting one of the enemy factories and released my bombs before turning away towards the sea. I had planned to come about and follow up my attack with a second run, but as it turns out, this was the final target. The enemy had been defeated, the base destroyed. All that remained was a single enemy aircraft, hoping to get into the sky, and I prepared to stop it with my guns. But the fighting ended. The enemy were defeated. Yet another glorious victory for the Boscali Defence Force. Thank you ever so much for watching, once again of course. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please do subscribe and leave a like. Tell me what you think in the comments. Tell me what you would do differently. Anyway, thank you once again. See you again soon. Cheerio.